Welcome to Lawyers Without Billboards, where we break down family law and other areas of the law. No gimmicks, no legal jargon, just real, unfiltered talk from real lawyers. Join your hosts, Steve, Patty, Jimmy, and Alexa, partners at Shewmaker Lewis, a law firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Every episode, they tackle the legal questions that matter most: divorce, custody, child support, alimony, and everything in between. They'll pull back the curtain to give you real insights on what happens inside the courtroom and beyond.
All right.
We're going.
It's the Ides of March, and we're doing this thing. Number 3 of the day.
What?
Equitable division.
Why do we keep labeling number?
I don't know. Welcome to Lawyers Without Billboards.
So what are you worried about? Just sit over there and think about yourself.
I do that enough as it is. I don't need to do that on podcasting.
Okay, this is my podcast, so be quiet. Okay, hey,
it's his turn.
Shewmaker Lewis, Lawyers Without Billboards, here we are.
Hey, before we get started,
Yeah.
I have a confession.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Buckle up, people.
Forgive me, Father.
You know.
This is about that pool boy on the cruise?
No, different one.
Okay.
Not different pool boy.
Different confession.
This year will be the 30th reunion
Of what?
from me graduating from West Point.
The United States Military Academy at West Point?
20th high school reunion, you shared.
Yeah. So, but you know what?
Tell me about it.
I gotta be honest with you. I don't think I really graduated from West Point.
Do you have that recurring dream that you didn't? Because I do.
Was it the handball issue?
No. I mean, and I'm just curious. Before I get into this, what is the statute of limitations on like college diploma take-backs? You know, like they commit.
Well, the
I think
general
we'll pass it.
the general statute of limitations under the Uniform Code of Military Justice is 5 years. That's the general.
Oh, then you're good.
Okay.
How about like regular high school?
Why do you think you didn't graduate?
Well, okay. You know, the second summer at West Point, we go to Camp Buckner. It's basically a summer of field training. And, you know, one of the requirements of the summer is you have to pass land navigation, both day and nighttime land navigation.
Right.
I didn't pass nighttime land navigation.
And they never retested you?
And so, and you have to understand something, okay? Let's talk about what I know you know what night land navigation is like.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you do it in teams and pairs, and you're wearing your Kevlar helmets, and on the back of the Kevlar helmets are these two reflective strips, and those are the cat eyes. And
Luminous eyes.
yeah, you shoot an azimuth with your compass, and you tell your partner, okay, go that direction, and I'll tell you if you're going too far left or too far right, and then stop, and then I'll catch up with you, and we do this leapfrog thing until we get to our point. And you had to get 3 out of 5 points, and this is in upstate New York, right? So it's not like Georgia. I mean, it was like trees and rocks and hills, and
We have trees and rocks and hills here and swamps.
not like they do in New York. Okay, I'm just saying.
We got swamps.
Did Alexa pay you to say things like this?
Haven't you ever seen the Dukes of Hazzard? We have all that stuff here.
Yeah, no. So
all that's
You remind me of Uncle Jesse or Enos. I can't tell which one.
stop. So
I'm going to choose to not talk about I'm not going to respond.
Guys, I did it.
well done, Jimmy. Well done. So,
right,
so
so
my
what's your
partner,
point?
My partner was Casey Houseworth, and her and I were going through, and you have to get 3 of the 5 points, and we only got 2. And we're running out of time because it's also timed, and we're running out of time. We're like, forget it. We got 5 minutes left. We just about go back to base camp. We're walking back to base camp, you know, and people are like, they can't use flashlights, okay? You guys understand that. It's dark.
Sure.
People, there was one girl that fell off a cliff.
Totally counterintuitive. The rest of the world is like, it's dark, I need a flashlight. The Army's like, it's dark, you can't use the flashlight. Exactly. It's counterintuitive.
I mean,
In fact, you should do this with nothing.
yeah, no, you could pull out your flashlight with a little red lens so you could look at your map, but that was it. So we're walking back, and of course I put my hands together because my hands are like all sticky because I must have fallen in something because you fall down all the time. And we get into the light where the base camp is, and I look at my hands, and my hands are all bloody.
Ugh.
Because when I had fallen, I had split open my hand, and so I was all bloody. So Casey's like, well, I'll go check in and let him know that we're back. You go to the medic tent. So I go to the medic tent. I'm in the tent. The medic's sitting there, you know, cleaning up my split up hand. And Casey comes in, and she's like, Patty, we passed. I was like, no, Casey, we didn't. And she's like, no, we did. I said, no, Casey, we didn't. And we're like doing this, like, you know, never ending do loop. And she's like, I was like, we didn't pass. She's like, I know, I tried to tell them that. And she's like, and they marked us down as passing. And you know, West Point has this honor code thing, cadets shall not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. So I'm like, Casey, we did not pass. She's like, I know, I kept trying to tell him that. So they marked us down as passing.
So this harkens back to when I got a C in professional ethics in law school, and I went to the professor, Dean Roy Sobelson,
I had Sobelson for PR too.
to complain about my grade. And he looked at me and he said, Steve, you just must not be very ethical. So you are telling us all how unethical you were.
No, well, Casey said she told them that we didn't pass, and they wouldn't believe her, and they marked us down as passing. Now I've lived my whole life with this
guilt,
this
obviously.
guilt,
Even if you'd
secret.
passed, you should still feel bad.
Casey's going to listen to this and be like, Patty, shut up.
Well, no, Casey's in the clear because after 2 years at West Point, she decided it wasn't for her, so she left West Point.
Okay, even if you'd legit
Take
passed,
backseats on your degree. I think you're fine.
even
Okay.
if you had legitimately passed land navigation, let's assume for the moment you had. How sissy is this? Because I'm a graduate of the United States Army Ranger School where we had to do night land navigation by ourselves. In fact, you're not even allowed to talk to another human being.
Yeah, but it wasn't in New York.
No, it was in Georgia.
Where they don't have trees and rocks and bushes and things.
They brought them in, okay, because we had them.
From New York.
And wait a minute, vines and snakes.
Is that part of why
And mosquitoes.
Army can't balance that budget?
No.
Right.
They bring all those rocks.
bringing
The
all those
Army,
rocks and
when I went, the Army actually had little people out there with machetes. I mean, it was dangerous, okay? And I said little people, all right.
for you.
Look, 5 whole minutes to hear about Patty's confession. Oh, my God.
Almost 6 minutes,
Let's move on. So what have we been doing other than Patty?
Point ones.
Other than Patty
Point one, Patty.
freaking out
Point one we'll never get back.
about stuff that happened 30 years ago. Yes.
I'm a fraud.
I have.
Because that
I've
didn't
been saying that for years. So what's the firm been up to lately? I'll start. A week or so ago, we hosted an event for Judge Alice Benton, a campaign event.
2 weeks ago now.
2 weeks ago, we had
Guys, I mean, like,
right at 100
months ago.
people. We had right at 100 people come to the event. Judge Alice Benton, newly appointed to the Fulton County bench, great lady. Enjoy hanging out with her. Had a good time. Raised some money for the campaign. Good times were had by all. The event was on a Tuesday, March 25th.
Taco Tuesday. It was
It's Taco
February
Tuesday.
25th.
Right. Taco Tuesday. We had Willie's Tacos.
February.
Right.
Yeah.
We had. Did I say March? I meant February. Had a good time. Last week.
March 25th. That hasn't happened yet.
Last week, I had a case against the United States Army, all of the Army, a general court-martial, dismissed. So
They saw the threat that you presented.
that's right, feeling pretty good about that. Jim Holmes in our office turns 80.
This week on the
March 18th.
Yeah.
March 18th.
80, the big 80. That's like the big 40 times 2.
That's
Or the
exactly
big
like that.
20
Look at the
times
big
four.
brain on
Look
Steve.
at the mathing going on over
The
here.
big
Happy.
0 times 8.
How about it?
Happy birthday to Jim.
Or
Jim
the big
is,
5 times.
Jim is an of-counsel attorney associated with Shewmaker and Lewis, and he is a fabulous mediator and does great work.
Already in Lightem as well.
Yep, and we've known him for, we haven't known him for 80 years, but we've
Not
known him
quite.
for a while. And he's a good guy. I think he was only like 60 when I met him. I don't know. But anyway, shout out to Jim. Anyhow, so
Weird. He was, about 60 when you met him. Because it's not like he's changed at all.
No.
I know it. Today's dad joke is not really a dad joke. I want to tell him myself. I want to tell myself.
You're telling yourself.
I think we talked about it in previous episodes. The men's room at Shewmaker and Lewis is a sight to behold. Many people know about that. It's a collection of eclecticisms, and it's neat. And when people go in there, they often pause and they look around, which is part of the process. But the problem is that Jimmy over here, Jimmy Lewis, and Tuscan Fairfield and Moses, our paralegal, are jokesters. So sometimes you could be in there and stuff will happen, like they'll intentionally turn off the lights or something. So I'm in one of the bathroom stalls, the one against the wall. We were just referred to as Jimmy's stall.
Right.
And I'm in there
That's really-
doing my business, and I hear somebody.
Why are we talking about
I'm
this?
getting there, and I
never
hear
gonna get to the
in the
podcast
morning,
episode.
and I hear somebody nosing around out there, and I assume it's Jimmy or Tuscan messing with me.
Anyone would be-
So I said, dude, don't fuck around. I said, you need.
Now you're the one saying.
I know. I said, I said, and I said, dude, you better step off. So whoever it was leaves. So I get done with my business, and I walk into one of our main conference rooms because I'm meeting for the first time with a potential client. I walk in, and there's a guy there. I'm not going to say his name. And I said, hey, good morning. Nice to meet you. And he's like, man, that's a great men's room, but I irritated somebody in there. So So I had to apologize profusely and I sit here thinking about it. So a guy comes to a lawyer's office
And gets yelled at.
and because
In the bathroom.
and people come to our office because they're filing for a divorce or
This makes me think of his Home Alone 2.
right. And it's like
Get out of here, you know, little pervert. Something
Right.
silly.
and the guy walks into the men's room and
You're the mean uncle.
I know, and the men's room is just like it blows him away how cool it is. So he's looking around, and then some dude he doesn't even know is like, dude, you need to step up.
Not even some dude, some voice from the stall.
I did that, and
Oz over here.
I feel
screaming
so
at the guy.
bad. I told him I'd represent him as divorce for free.
Yeah, no, you didn't.
Not really. No, okay. All right. Bottom line. All right, let's move on. Let's get serious. Game faces.
about
Today,
No.
we're going to talk about equitable division of property. The phrase equitable division of property. I'm going to lecture a little bit, and don't let me get too dry. This is how ignorant Steve Shewmaker went to public school in Alabama, Stan. This is how ignorant I am. You'd see the word you'd see the word equitable like on the side of a skyscraper or something when you go downtown. And I was all
Equitable building.
Yeah, the equitable building. Yeah.
That's literally all he's talking about.
I'd get all the way through high school, all the way through college. Don't even know what the word equitable means. If you had grabbed Lieutenant Shewmaker with a college degree, or me in college, and said, "What does equitable mean?" I probably couldn't define it.
I don't think that word was, alone.
Right, there were other words I didn't know. Yeah, but
There's words you use now that you still don't know.
but I use them. So the bottom line is, it wasn't until I went to law school that I learned what the word equitable means. So equitable.
Because who uses the word equitable?
Lawyers.
Building in Atlanta. That's about it.
It's not. I mean, in lay people, who uses the word
Well,
equitable?
lawyers, attorneys, and barristers and counselors use the word.
Ooh, barristers and judges.
And judges. So the bottom line is, equitable means fair. It doesn't mean what's fair to you. If you have, Mark and Mary getting divorced, they both have a different idea of what's equitable than a judge or a jury might have. But let's get into it. Because when you're divorcing in the state of Georgia and about 39 other states, the majority rule across the country is that property shall be divided equitably.
As opposed to what do the other 11 states do?
Well, there's a minority of states, and most of them are out west, and they divide property under what's called community property. So, okay.
Why do you think there's a difference? Why do you think some states do community property and others do equitable? How did that come about?
I don't know. I'm not prepared to answer that question today.
Well, maybe that'll be another
Brain buster.
Maybe that'll be another podcast. How did it come about?
We did start talking about this in episode 2, where we debunked some of the common myths and misconceptions about divorce, and this was one of them. We'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. In Georgia, there are 3 types of property transfers. One of them is property of the marriage, which we'll get into more detail, and that's divided at the time of divorce between the parties, and then they both get what's called their separate property, the separate estate. So if I have $1 million that belongs to both parties and it gets divided in half, they both walk out of the divorce with half, okay, or maybe about half.
Good math. There you
Equitable.
go.
Right.
Equitable.
Now, there's 2 other things, which I'm not going to talk about today, but just to distinguish, there's alimony. So once you get your half and the other guy gets his half, alimony is from your separate money that flows to the other party after the divorce for support, maintenance, and we're not going to talk about that today. Then there's child support, which flows from one party to the other for the benefit of a child, okay, for child rearing. All we're going to talk about right now in this brief podcast is property division. Again, Georgia follows majority rule, equitable. So just real quick on community property and equitable division, where they're similar is that a judge has to make a decision. Is this marital property or is this separate property? In both types of states, if it's separate property, it goes to that person.
Right.
If it's marital property in a community property state, the presumption is it's divided 50-50. Those states like California, Washington, Louisiana, Texas, they may have different rules with some exceptions, but the general starting point is 50%. Equitable division in Georgia is different than that. It's, okay, we have to determine what's property of the marriage, and then it's divided equitably. Nowhere in the law does it say 50-50, okay?
But practically, like we've talked about, it's usually 50-50 unless you move the judge one way or the other.
Right. And then a lot of judges will tell you that, as we talked about.
That actually really kind of disturbs me because, and I talk to people about this, we're at equitable division of property state, but it really feels like we are headed toward being a community property state because, you even have conversations about, you go to mediation, the mediator's like, well, why wouldn't the judge divide?
Right,
50-50?
right, exactly. Give me a reason.
The burden's almost on you to be like, not
Right.
50-50.
Right.
And judges will tell you that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But, we spend a lot of time, let's take a step back to what Steve was saying. We spend a lot of our time, just dealing with the issue of what's marital.
Right. So let's talk about what that means. Marital property is property, first and foremost, that's accumulated during the marriage by the fruits and labors of one, the other, or both of the parties. A great example is if I'm working my job at IBM and I get a $200,000 bonus during the marriage.
Even still a company.
I think technically.
Yes.
Okay.
And I get it.
That's harkens back to the 80s. I mean, you're really dating yourself.
Well, I dated myself all the way through junior high. Anyway, different. Okay, so 200.
Was that a fulfilling relationship?
Mostly, you never nag yourself.
You'd have to ask Pamela.
Oh my God, it's so bad. All right, let's back to the point. I know you're deliberately trying to get me off track. I know that. Okay, so here's the bottom line. If you think if I earn $200,000 as a bonus during the marriage from IBM, that's marital property. It doesn't matter if I put it into an account with just my name on it. It's because as of 1980, the Stokes decision in Georgia, property, the title of property doesn't matter. It's the character of the property. Was it earned during the marriage by the fruits and the labors of the parties?
I actually got to talk about the Stokes case yesterday in court.
Did you?
Yeah.
Patty will do that. Patty kicked butt yesterday in DeKalb County Court.
Throw some stuff out there.
She was in front of Judge Brian Lake, a great judge. And wherever Patty goes, it's like a blitzkrieg. She just lays waste to people.
I like it.
It's just horrible. Anyway, so
It's a little aggressive.
I know it's a little aggressive, but okay, let's.
Very charming.
Clearly.
Okay, you guys you're just taking me off track. It's horrible.
So you talk about equity?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Marital property.
So one of the things that I get all the time on calls from people is, well, all the property is titled in my name, or I get the inverse. Oh, it's all titled in his name. It doesn't matter.
You know the one I get?
What's that?
I paid for it.
Yeah.
I know. Wait a second.
But did you? Where did that come from?
With what money?
Right.
If you're telling me this is money that you got from your grandmama,
When a guy says that to me, he says, hey, I bought this with my money. She didn't earn it. And at first I say, was it during the marriage? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, but she had to look at you naked. That usually disarms a guy. And he's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I get your point. All right. So anyway, back to this. You have to differentiate marital property from premarital property.
or separate.
Or separate property, right.
Right.
Premarital property is quite obviously property you earned prior to the marriage. And then separate property can be acquired during the marriage by a gift from a third party.
Inheritance?
If you inherit money or if your rich parent gives you money,
Oh, that $50 at Christmas that mom gave me?
that's you can have it. So,
Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud because she might not have given my brothers and sisters the same amount.
but
That's why she's not
Just
listening.
kidding.
but here's
Or she gave them more.
Yeah.
but here's the pitfall.
Sorry, didn't we talk last time?
Sorry, middle child, Patty.
Listen, you said
You
last
got the
podcast-
limits.
You said last episode that you thought you weren't the favorite anymore. Maybe it's true.
Here's the pitfall. Maybe you interrupted your mother and siblings too much. All right. Here's the pitfall. If Jimmy inherits $200,000 and he puts it into a bank account that's jointly titled with Alexa,
It is commingled.
he has converted that from separate to marital property as a matter of law. Okay.
Right, Jimmy?
And a lot of people either don't understand that or they get upset. And I usually tell people, if you inherited this money 10 years ago and you were in the height of a happy marriage and you did that, don't be upset. You did what decent people do. Right. Every once in a while I meet a dude, sometimes a lady, who's been segregating that money from day one. And I'm like, that's a pretty cynical person. So most people are going to convert stuff like that without thinking. Now, there are certain accounts that can't be, by definition, converted, like a 401k.
Can't be joint. Can't be joint.
Right. Title.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, or a military pension.
You can't have an individual retirement account.
That's joint.
It's joint.
Right.
Okay, well, let me throw something at you because I've had this come up in several cases.
Tell me about it.
Parties own a marital residence.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point during the marriage, and let's say in this case, it's the husband quit claims his interest to the wife.
Yep.
So we go from having a jointly titled asset to it now being just individually titled just in the wife's name. Marital property, isn't that, by your same reasoning, isn't that now a gift just to the wife and now it's wife's property?
I think it is. Do you have any case law on that?
Case law says it's still joint property.
Is it still joint
Still
property?
marital property. Unless you can prove unless you can prove that
The intention.
that it was the intent was it was supposed to be a gift and it was only supposed to be the wife. And you know what? The cases I've seen they're doing it to get away from.
Yeah,
creditors.
I was going to say it's probably some sort of creditor issue or some sort of business related matter where they're trying to alleviate it.
I hate to get too dry with you, but one of the cases in Georgia that I think is the best case to look at, or one of the best cases, is the Shaw case, Shaw versus Shaw. I don't know these people. I actually looked it up. I don't know the attorneys or the judge, but it's pretty simple. In the Shaw case, I think it was the husband inherited a bunch of money, put it in a joint bank account. Okay, inherited property, titled it in both his and his wife's name. Then he and his brother and the wife bought some more acreage, I think in Florida, and they each got a 1/3 interest, separate 1/3 interest, 6.67. And he goes to divorce court, and the judge is like, yeah, that's all marital property. Divides the money, divides the other property, and they each keep their separate interests in this Florida parcel of land. And the husband says, no, it was inherited, it was mine. And the court on review, the appeals court, the Georgia Supreme Court quite rightly said, look, you converted this when you put it in joint name.
Yep.
Now, I will flip that around. That's the Shaw case, but I'll flip it around, and I will say this.
He's going to remix it.
Well, no, I'm going to say this. I often have a conversation with an attorney that says, hey, this is marital property. And I'm like, you're right. It's been titled now in joint name. That means by law, it's marital property. But now by equity, by fairness, the judge does, or the jury does not necessarily have to divide it equal. Because a lot of attorneys, I think a lot of attorneys think it's joint marital, must be 50-50. This is not California. So that's when you get into conduct. You can even look at separate property. If Jimmy inherits $1 million and keeps it separate, and now we're arguing in a divorce about how to divide $200,000, that separate money can be considered.
You have that case right now where my client put about $200,000 into marital property from inheritance, and then his spouse just recently received an inheritance of almost $1 million. Has kept it separate. She doesn't want to divide the house with giving him credit for his inheritance. She wants to divide it 50-50, even though she's got this giant separate estate over here. Technically, yes, marital property, but is it fair?
She may not win.
You know what the problem is? We know all this stuff because we're attorneys. There should be a class. When you go to get your marriage license, there should be a class on marriage, right? And be like, okay, y'all need to know this going into this into marriage.
Alexa's making faces like no.
People wouldn't get married.
Well, then they just have kids on wedlock.
You're right.
We still have the business.
It's true.
Now, you must always remember that the burden is upon, who is the burden on in court if you want to say there's a property and I want to claim an interest in it? Who has that burden?
Person who's claiming the interest.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think you had said in episode 2, the Boomer case.
Now, realistically, though, whichever side I'm on, I'm still going to be arguing that and basically taking on, maybe not necessarily taking on that burden, but making the arguments for why, if it's my client who has the premarital interest, I got all my spreadsheets and all my basis for that. And if we're trying to show that, no, this is all marital, I'm attacking it the same way.
If your argument in court is the other side has the burden, not me, I'll tell you, even in criminal court, that's fine. If you want to rest on that, fine. But Jimmy's right. If you don't come in with your guns loaded, ready to go, then you're stupid. I'm talking about the attorney. You're stupid.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
A lot of times it depends on the circumstances and what the asset is. I mean, if it's clearly premarital, then the burden can shift to the other side to prove. I had a client who had, is a military officer, had been in the military for the last 20 years, and the marriage was 15 years long.
Yeah.
And he had a 401k from a prior employment. Well, we all know active duty military officers don't have a 401k.
Right.
They don't have a private 401k. And this guy had a 401k. And it's like, and the opposing counsel's like, well, prove that it's not marital. I'm like,
it's pretty easy.
I was like, that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Husband and military officer
to do that,
the entire marriage. He can't participate in a 401k.
But there are 2 points that we must bring out to kind of bring this full circle. It's the asset that never gets jointly titled that comes into the marriage premarital. Like, let's say when you married Jimmy, you had a separate condo, a condo, didn't you?
No, yeah, but I had sold it already. So no.
Let's okay. Let's use your example. You bring a house into the marriage, and it's not completely paid for. There's a mortgage.
Yeah.
Well, whatever the equity in that house is prior to the marriage, that is a separate interest, at least conceptually.
Yep.
And then I start looking at mortgage payments and taxes paid and improvements made and the source of the money for all of that. And if it was earned during the marriage, that money is now marital money.
Right.
And remember, when you marry somebody, you are signing up for this agreement. Every dollar I make from the moment I'm married to you until we divorce is now money of the marriage. And if that money flows into your separate asset, your house, to pay for the continuing obligation, that house, though it may be titled in your name, is at least somewhat a marital asset. Now, sometimes, and this is where it gets really funky, sometimes you get an asset like a paid-off house. And so I'll pose it to you all like this. Let me give you a hypothetical. I want you to tell me. Let's say that Alexa and Jimmy get married. Alexa's got a paid-off house, paid off, and she is fortunate enough or lucky enough that she got it appraised the month before they married.
Again, this goes back to everybody should have a marriage class before they married.
And she gets it appraised. It is. I agree with Alexa. She gets it appraised the month before the marriage, and it's appraised at $100,000. After 10 years of marriage, the house is now worth $500,000.
Boom.
Is it marital property or not marital property?
That's what we did with it.
Long as she did not use marital funds for any kind of maintenance, upkeep, renovations.
The law says that the person saying it's a joint asset, Jimmy in this case, has the burden to prove that the appreciation was more than market forces, that it was because of some fruits of labor. Now, market forces may be a big factor, so now the poor judge or jury has to say, well, how much do I attribute to the market, which is not marital, and how much do I attribute to, the paint, the renovation, the paying of the tax?
Something that I had talked to a guy not that long ago about was that he said, look, I did a bunch of these renovations and did a bunch of this demo, did a bunch of the electrical, did a bunch of this. And I said, okay, well, that's going to be a problem. And how do we itemize that? Do we need to get quotes of somebody who has similar skills to you and look at all that?
Right.
And he was like, oh, God, I don't know.
So,
and it ended up we found a number that everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we often do.
So what's wrong with a marriage class? You call it divorce planning. Isn't that same thing as a prenuptial agreement?
Yeah, that's why not a lot of people get prenups.
I mean, people get them, but you're right, don't 100%. Right.
Don't need prenups.
All right.
Steve and I got married. We didn't have anything, so we didn't need prenup.
Right. The last
I
point.
apparently needed one according to Steve's hypothetical.
Oh, you needed. I mean, just look at you.
And now you have a
No.
Exactly.
Now, the last point I want to bring up about equitable division, because it comes up a lot, and I know you guys all.
We got like 3 minutes, Steve.
Divorce has already signed an affidavit of election to sell with me if we get divorced.
But he gets Molly, so then
Steve gets Molly.
Whatever.
how are you going to make
The
that
last
work?
serious point that I have to bring up was we often get calls, somebody, and it happens a lot with military pensions, but somebody will say, hey, we've been separated for 3 years. So her interest in the pension stopped 3 years ago. And the law in Georgia is very clear. The law says that the marital property doesn't cease to be marital property until the date of divorce. There are other
Payson versus Payson?
that may be Payson versus Payson, but there are other states that have contrary laws that go to the date of separation. Georgia's not one of them. However, just because marital property accumulates up until the date of the divorce order doesn't mean you can't argue equitably.
And it is well within a judge's
Yeah,
discretion.
the judge has a discretion to divide as of the date of divorce or separation.
Jury. And let me tell you something that opened my eyes up wide is Patty and I, well, all of us really had a massive jury trial in Walton County in front of Judge Osborne a few years ago.
Great judge.
And we pick a jury, multi-million-dollar case, and who was the foreman of our jury? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was
A stunt man. And I look at clients,
so
like,
cool, by the way.
clients come into my office, I want a jury trial. I said, well, would you like a stunt man to decide what's going to happen to your marriage?
That and we had, a girl who was 19 years old and going to community college, and we're dealing with a, $15 million estate. What do you want in a jury? You want somebody with life experience. And
Gonna stunt man.
You gotta get what you get.
I think there was a guy also who was like 22 who had just gotten done with his first enlistment contract with the Marines.
Yeah.
All right, we're wrapping up equitable division. Here's what I'm going to say. Steve Shewmaker at Shewmaker@shewmakerlewis.com. Email me if you have questions about Equitable Division. But before we go, Barry Nathanson. Everybody here knows Barry Nathanson.
Yep,
that guy.
Barry and I went to high school together in Montgomery, Alabama. Went to Jeff Davis High School. I can't say some of the stuff that we did as hoodlums because I checked it this morning. Alabama has a very open statute of limitations on certain stuff. So I can't say all the stuff we did, but Barry is now our financial planner for the firm, and those are insurance
Great.
and some of our investments personally. He's a great guy, married to a wonderful woman, but Barry had either his 57th or 58th birthday earlier this week, and I missed it. I'm going to send him something, but happy birthday to Barry Nathanson.
Happy
All right.
birthday, Barry.
Shewmaker and Lewis, lawyers without billboards, because we got no billboard, right?
We got no billboard.
No billboard.
No billboard.
Yet.
And that's a wrap. Boom. Hey, you didn't say...
That's it for this episode of Lawyers Without Billboards. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to follow and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more resources or to get in touch with us, visit shewmakerandlewis.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.